Hello, I'm Gary Quinn, and welcome to another episode of Ready, Set, Live. My guest today is Tom Moore, a Tony and Emmy Award nominated theater, film, and television director. In the theater, Tom is best known as the director of Night Mother, which won the Pulitzer Prize and which is also where he received his second Tony nomination. His first Tony nomination was for the direction of the big band musical Over Here, which brought the Andrews Sisters out of retirement. His first Broadway production was the original Grease, and recently published, he edited a new book along with Adrienne Barbeau and Ken Weissman, filmed Grease. Tell me more, tell me more. Don't go away, I'll be right back. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Nice to see you again. You know, Tom, your credits are impeccable. Amazing.
What do you mean by impeccable?
Meaning that you have followed, from Yale to, Lafayette High School, Meridian, Mississippi. I love Mississippi, by the way. I have met several people from Mississippi.
Mississippi's got its problems, but it's a beautiful state.
Do you go back much?
Not very much, because most of my relatives are gone now. But I spent a lot of fantastic childhood summers in Mississippi, especially on the Gulf Coast, which was really beautiful. Wow. And you said Lafayette. It's very important where I come from that's called West Lafayette, Indiana, because there's a big difference between across the river Lafayette and West Lafayette.
Okay, West Lafayette, got it. And what was it that did you always have like a yearning to go work in the theater? Or I know you studied also. You have a BA. You have an MFA in acting, and was it always I'm going to the theater to direct, or was it just a passion that's what you were going to do?
Well, I have a Master in Fine Arts from Yale, which was in directing, but I had done a number of high school things, but I had never thought of it as a possibility of a real career, and I was actually planning to be a lawyer, which when I got to college, I proceeded to do for about 2.5 years. And then in the middle of my junior year, I switched over to a theater speech curriculum. And that kind of led to Yale, and that kind of led to New York, and that kind of led to a career. It's amazing how these things happen.
Exactly. And so the first, let's say, arrival in New York City, did you, obviously you knew people there, or you started I know the first show was Grease, the infamous.
Well, I was incredibly lucky in terms of Grease because I was only a few years out of Yale. I think I was 27 when we started rehearsals, and we opened when I was 28. And that, of course, has made the entire difference in my life, not to mention career, because it set me off in so many different directions. And life was never really the same since then. It's a whole series of serendipitous, lucky events that led to that moment.
And it was funny because, we know mutual people, Mary Lou Henner, how she got that role, and, all the people that auditioned and got the role. The people are now iconic actors, John Travolta, Barry Bostwick. What was it like, you being at the helm of seeing all these young actors, and all of a sudden they've just...
Well, of course, they weren't John Travolta, and they weren't Richard Gere, and they weren't Patrick Swayze at that point. They were just another actor looking for a job. And the role that really was a star maker for the entire 8 years we ran on Broadway, and during those entire series of 8 national companies we sent out, was the role of Danny Zuko. And that's why we kind of populated the stars of films for a number of years based on who played that role.
Who was in your terms, you knew that was a star when you saw them?
Well, everybody likes to say in retrospect that I was the one that noticed it first. There was something in John when he came in. It was all over the place, the audition. He was only 18 years old. But there was something, as they say, charismatic, something that made you pay attention, which is something we looked for all the time. But with him, with all of those people, actually, you mentioned Mary Lou, Adrienne Barbeau. All of those people have something that makes you pay attention before they even say the first word. And you end up going with those people. And we had an incredible track record. It's one of the things I'm most proud of during the history of that show.
I mean, it's the longest running show on Broadway.
Well, it's not the longest running show now. Oh. Now we speak in terms of decades.
Okay.
Because Phantom of the Opera, which looks like it will never close, is going to probably beat all records of all time because it's. I see my dog peeking into my frame.
Oh, yeah, this is Finnegan, by the way.
Yes. Hello.
He's such a beautiful collie.
He's the star of the show. I don't use him as a support dog. I simply am on my way to a vacation spot, and I can't leave him in the hot car. But what were you asking me?
Oh, basically, you knew that each person had a vibration or magical quality.
Well, they have a certain special thing that you pay attention to. When I talk to young actors, I always talk to them. I say the moment you enter the room is maybe the most important moment of your stay in an audition, because that's when people are going to notice you. Some people, believe it or not, suck the energy from the room when they come in, and a charismatic actor doesn't. And a charismatic actor and all these people that you've talked about being stars, they need that stardom. They need you to recognize it in them. I once did an interview for Time magazine about John Travolta, and they asked me what it was. I think this is an odd thing to say, but it was if he created a vacuum that needed John Travolta in the world, and then he stepped into it. Because it was almost that magical. And that's why we become so obsessed with them.
Exactly. And being a director in everything you have directed, what was the most difficult project that you say, when I would go to work, it was like a nightmare? Was there anything that you felt, or it always flowed?
I had some feelings that way in television because I did 25 years of episodic television, and some of it was extraordinary because you had companies that loved having a director there that knew what he was doing and wasn't just moving cameras around. But I don't think I ever had that in the theater. I had moments where I knew the project was going down. That's incredibly depressing and frightening, but that's a different thing. And most actors, especially in the theater, will do anything to try to make it work and to make it work for you. And I try to encourage them, and usually we have a great time. There are some of the shows that had the least success. My production of Frankenstein, which was the very opposite of Grease. It was a disaster, but it was one of the best experiences I ever had because it was an extraordinary group of people, and we were trying new things that had never been tried before, and it was pretty great.
Well, I think also what's so important in what you say in that answer was that you have to have darkness before you have lightness, and sometimes the failure has to happen first before you recognize, how do I make this work, or what's the lesson in that?
Well, my life kind of went backwards that way.
Really?
because Grease, which was my first big anything, had gigantic success.
How do I top it?
And continued. I had another Broadway show, so they were running simultaneously, called Over Here. 2 years later, they were around the block from each other. And it was only later when I got to Frankenstein that I realized, it doesn't always go up. And it was a considerable readjustment, and life-changing when that happens, especially when it happens backwards like that.
What was your memory working with Carol Burnett?
Carol, of course, is Carol Burnett, and she's phenomenal, and I like everybody. Everybody thinks they grew up with Carol Burnett, even the people that are her contemporaries. But she was so much a fixture in our lives. The only problems we had were because the play she was doing, Moon Over Buffalo, had been written by Ken Ludwig, the playwright, as a single-hander for a male actor. And the idea was that we were going to open it up and make it a couple. And then because Carol was a comedian, it was a constant readjustment of the script to match her skills, her talents, and to give her an opportunity. I don't think we probably did it enough. She's the reason we ran. We ran for, I think, a year. But I had enormous fun working with her. But I think it was a struggle for her. I don't know that she loved it.
Yeah, I mean, she is such an icon. I was fortunate to know her daughter and know her for a while before she passed, Carrie. And I met Carol at an event with her daughter, but just a legend. It's just, I think Hollywood legends have more and more disappeared, but I was having this conversation with someone how that the actors of that time frame had such a different quality about them that they really knew how, they always remembered your name, they always showed up on time. It was very refreshing to see that old Hollywood and how it's basically disappeared.
Well, maybe it's disappeared, and maybe the venues in which they get to present are just so different that it doesn't become a unifying universal force. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's certainly still movie stars, but a star like Carol Burnett, I mean, we all knew Carol Burnett. She came into all of our homes on a Saturday night, and you adored her, so she came with an iconic status. She, by the way, is one of the most gracious of all stars, and treats pretty much everyone, no matter who it is, with the same interest and the same delight. She's a pretty amazing woman, and she's still doing things. I just saw that she's about to do another television show, a recurring role. I can't remember what it was.
Good for her.
But, yeah, absolutely. When you least expect it, there's Carol again.
Yeah, no, I want to have her on the show because she's iconic.
No, she's amazing. She's really amazing.
Tom, during this whole process of life and your experiences, what has been the biggest challenge that you've overcome? And it could be any decade. What was the hardest moment?
I feel very lucky in that most of my struggles to overcome have been garden variety, because I've always had confidence. I think maybe what I was overcoming, though, and probably is one of the reasons I've had some success, is I was overcoming some family things that happened early in my life, and many of us have them. They weren't tragic, but they were problematic, and I think we all learned to adjust to them. I wish, in looking back, I could have not been so safe sometimes because I was carefully protecting myself. Mm-hmm. And I wish somehow I had been more open in that. But I don't. I mean, I just feel mostly that my life has been incredibly lucky. And I do credit it to luck, by the way. A lot of people are talented. A lot of people have skills. A lot of people develop skills. But to be at the right place at the right time in as many cases as I was is pretty unusual.
But you were also always in preparation.
You are always in preparation, but that's to a certain extent you're in preparation for life. I mean, I'm just adjusting. We just went through, as I think you know, an incredible few weeks in New York where it was like going back into the middle of one's career. I mean, actually, right. The beginning of my career, except we were already successful. And it was thrilling. And I'm now adjusting to the fact that, no, that wasn't the middle of my career. We were going back. And so I'm in the middle of adjusting to that. And I think that's what life is. There's a line in Night Mother, which you mentioned at the top of my credits, that I think is so simple, but I think it's the philosophy by which I live my life. As many of you know out there, the story is a mother trying to convince her daughter not to commit suicide, that there are reasons to go on living. And it takes place in real time over an hour and a half. And it's quite harrowing and touching and moving and all that. But at one point in trying to convince Jesse, she says, Jesse, things happen. You do what you can about them and you see what happens next. I think life is as simple as that. Whatever comes your way, you deal with it. You deal with it as thoroughly as you can, and then you move on, because something else is going to happen tomorrow. Something else is going to happen the next hour.
But I also, Tom, do believe that, and this is what I teach, is that by being in this flow, you create your own synchronicity, a divine synchronicity to be at the right place at the right time and the right energy. And if you look back on it, you see, oh, they were trained, they went, they showed up, how Mary Lou Henner got the audition. She was at school going to take a test and she gets a call. You have to go audition. She drops everything and goes. Something innate told her, I have to go to New York City.
Well, that is a certain ability to take chances, I think, which not everyone has. And Mary Lou's always had that. I mean, Mary Lou's glass, as you know, is half full, always. It has never, ever been half empty. And she has reinvented herself 1,000 times. I think we all reinvent ourselves, but Mary Lou has taken it to new levels. And she's still reinventing in terms of her one-woman show. And she does it all. So I guess it's synchronicity. But I still think you're very lucky, just like you're lucky with certain genetics that keep you healthy for a long time. I have this personal belief that you're also, within your genetics, is a built-in capacity to fight the battles of life. And some people somehow got more of that, and some people got less. It's why some people can go through terrible things and still come out on a positive side, whereas a lot of people, a first divorce, a first breakup, it's sort of the end of it for them. And that always amazes me because it just means it's a chance for a new beginning, as painful as it might be as it's happening.
Do you have any rituals that you do daily? Meditate, hike, walk? What is?
Well, I discovered my athleticism fairly late in life, and I tend to do a lot of that now. I certainly work out at the gym regularly.
We see each other at the gym a lot.
Yeah, we do. We do. And I do flying trapeze as a sport.
Yes.
Which I didn't discover until age 50, by the way.
I read about that. You were on the flying trap. Do you still do it?
I still do it. I don't do it as often, but that's primarily because the legendary flyer who taught me, who used to have a school in Los Angeles, moved to Vegas. So I now have to go to Santa Barbara, and it's a fantastic school, but it's 2 hours away, so I don't go as often. But
and what you go for a session, or
I go for a class. People always take that definition. Oh, you're a trapeze artist. Well, artist has nothing to do with it, because that's not what I am. But I do love doing it. I love the freedom of it. I love what people tend to love doing it in trapeze, and you'd be amazed. It seems to fit right in with all the things you believe in, because it's rediscovering for most of these people. It's rediscovering at a later age or even a young age, but something that they are not trained to do, like the legendary trapeze flyers. For instance, there might be an eye surgeon, there might be a lawyer, there might be another kind of doctor, there might be a flower arranger. Everybody has different careers, but everybody's focused. And what trapeze does, you're only focusing on yourself. You're only focusing on your own skills. There's no competitive nature to it whatsoever. You're only competing with yourself to see what else you can
And
do.
how long is the class?
About 2 hours.
Oh my
usually.
God!
Sometimes you'll do a workshop that's
And it's a
full
group
day,
of what,
a
10
full day.
people?
10 to 11, yeah. 10 to
And you
12.
all get to do the.
And we all get to do it, and you get coached. It takes a staff, because when you're first learning, somebody's working safety lines, so they're down below pulling the lines, and there's usually somebody up on the board that's assisting with your takeoff. And then there's a catcher.
Can you be a beginner when you join the class?
Oh, totally, you can be a beginner. I mean, they have different classes. They have different levels classes. So there's beginner class, or there's an advanced class, or there's an open
Just
class,
open class.
depending on when you get up there. But you should try it
Oh
sometime.
my God, we should go. I
You'd
want to
love
do it.
You would enjoy it.
I would love. That's like, I always used to see the circus and say, I should be up there.
Well, I remember seeing the circus when I was a kid, and I didn't know that I said I should be up there, but I said I want to be up there.
Yeah.
It was all I looked forward to in the circus. I found clowns spooky I still find clowns spooky, but I found the flying trapeze to be supreme. It's interesting now, though, because Cirque du Soleil, which can be extraordinary, of course, as a show, but it's no longer the circus of personality. When you went to the circus in our day, my day, it was there were certain people you went to see. There was Tito Gaiona or Richie Gaiona who were flying, and that's why you went. The Gaiona family, they were the ones that taught me. I made a film about this, by the way, just to plug that film, but it's a documentary called The Flight Fantastic. And it shows the history of trapeze, but it also shows the trajectory of this family and how this family became this extraordinary. In the circus books, they're considered one of the greatest flying families that ever.
Wow. Is that on Netflix, by the way?
It's available on Amazon, but not Amazon Prime, and Vimeo, and it's available on Google Play.
And what's the title?
It's called The Flight Fantastic.
Ooh, I want to see that. The
A
Flight
story
Fantastic.
of legend and legacy on the flying trapeze.
Wow. When did you do that?
I did that we premiered it in 2015.
Nice.
We premiered it actually at the Egyptian Theater, and the Egyptian, because it had been used by the American Cinematheque, never sold out, and that premiere sold out. It was thrilling. It was really one of the most thrilling nights I've ever had. And of course, the Egyptians, where they had the very first Hollywood premiere ever.
Wow.
Back when it was
Incredible.
Sid Grauman's first theater.
What does the soul mean to you?
I guess, I'm never going to probably go to the mystic places you'd like me to go. The soul probably means to me the essence of who you are, what combines to make that happen, the thing that makes you unique, special. I don't necessarily... you can hear my dog, going, oh, no,
trying to
these
answer.
philosophy questions. We're not going to answer those.
I want to get out of here. To get to the lake.
But in terms of belief, I don't know where I stand. I was once very religious. I'm not now. Someone called me once the most spiritual non-spiritualist they had ever met. So I guess I'll go with that.
Okay. What does love mean to you?
Love means contentment. When you feel love, act on love, or in love, or just love of family, or love of
Yourself.
animals for that.
Yeah,
or
animals.
Love of self.
Animals are great because they, it's almost they understand without even having to say any words to them.
Oh, they understand so much. With collies, one of the reasons somebody was asking me this just recently, why I liked collies so much, and I said, interesting enough, I said because their soul seems to be coming through their eyes, and you see it and you feel it, and they instinctively know how to comfort you. I've had 6 collies over the years, and I used to take several of them to do therapy in hospitals, and it was amazing to see how kids would respond to that.
Oh, absolutely. They give off an energy, and there's studies where they put a dog in an old pension home, and everybody becomes happy.
Well, they do. They just light up, and people who haven't responded. Some people. I'm doing this anecdotally, but some people who've been in locked-in syndrome, or have been paralyzed. They all of a sudden will start responding for the first time because it brings back a very primitive joy that most of us felt in childhood.
What's next on the bucket list for Tom?
I don't have bucket lists. I've never had bucket lists. I always made sure during my career, as much as I worked, to also travel as much as I could. During that time, I never believed in that thing of, well, let's wait until we finish the career, because I was too aware at a way too young an age that life is tricky and you may not get that extra life. So take it while you can. So I'm just going to, my plan for the future is just to continue doing more of what I've done. It involves lots of travel. I love going to new locations, finding new cultures, new beliefs, new thoughts. But I also love the rituals of being home. One thing I have found, though, I thought at this point in my life that I'd probably be just fine with entertainment or travel. I always need a creative project. And this book, Grease, Tell Me More, just to plug it one more time,
Yes.
has been one of those projects, just like before that, the documentary was. Both of these projects are passion projects. They're things I wanted to do. They're not based on a career trajectory or a goal. I always tell people, I'm no longer in career building phase. Whatever that phase was, that's done. Somebody else can define that. I'm just looking for things that interest me now. And fortunately, it's infinite, my interest,
Right.
infinite.
Right. And I think with the book, Grease, Tell Me More, it's stories of almost behind the scenes of what went on. You edited this book, correct?
We did. What we did was we asked all of the people who had been involved in the 8 years. The entire studio starts to tremble as the big collie moves. We asked all of the people who had been involved in Grease during those 8 years on Broadway and during the 8 companies that traveled to provide stories. And the editing primarily, not only was the details in that story, but it was finding a way to connect those all up into one long narrative. The great fun of it is the fact that there are over 100 disparate voices in the book, and yet they somehow speak as one big family. And they're great fun. Some of it's moving, some of it's touching. One of the best compliments we've received on the book is when people say, I just didn't want it to end. I was so distressed when it closed 8 years later. So that's a nice thing.
Yeah, I felt being there that night that it was such a family, even having dinner with some of the ex-Grease members, that they're still a family.
Well, they're still family. I don't know that anybody's ex-Grease members. They did the show a while ago, but nobody becomes ex.
That's true.
That family stays.
You're right.
Stays coherent and one, and that's what the way all people that have been involved in it respond to it. It's
maybe there's a documentary there.
There may be, but I'm not doing it.
Okay.
One of the nice things about these doing things you've never done before is they're one-offs. I don't have to make a recurring career out of it. Also, you find with each of these, they are so hard. Any creative project is really hard, but especially when you're the one pushing it forward. Now, we were collaborators. Ken and Adrienne and I worked closely, so we all did equal work. But you're pushing it forward. Nobody else is saying, we got to do this. We've got this deadline. Our only deadline on the book was the fact we wanted it ready for the 50th anniversary. And fortunately, we got it delivered.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I thank you, Tom, for your time today. It's a pleasure to have you in studio. And if anybody would like to buy the book, they can go to Amazon. They can go to Barnes & Noble, or it's called Grease, Tell Me More. It's really a pleasure to sit down with you up close and personal.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And thank you for having me. And my dog.
And Finnegan.
And Finnegan.
The famous Finnegan, right, Finny?
Finnegan. You'd have had a much better interview with Finnegan.
Oh, wow. Well, join me for another episode of Ready, Set, Live. Until next time, I'm Gary Quinn. Be well.